Yeah.
Jazz along.
Because I'm catching the first ferry.
And just make it pretty, like right now, figure it out.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to like, it is, and I thought I saw your.
That's what I guess. We're trying to get some emojis over there.
Yes, well, see you ready for
Are you done with the 5 largest
So how about
ocean producers?
yeah, no, that's what, and I, so like, this now you're. You know how it is.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our it still says regular on it. special meeting of council for February 7th, 3 p.m. And we're honored to gather here on the traditional territories of the Skohomish Nation. First, I apologize for being a little bit late. All day long I've been dealing with a regional emergency regarding homelessness on the Sunshine Coast. Everyone will know about this soon, that there was a fire at the Rain City Shelter this morning, displacing 36 people. So that's been my day, trying to work with a lot of community agencies and other local government officials and trying to figure out how we're going to deal with this. As there's not a lot of serious damage to the building fire-wise, but the sprinkler system was set off, and it's looking like quite a long period where people will have nowhere to stay at night unless we find something soon, a solution soon. So again, apologies for being a little late. I need a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded. Moved by Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries. And the first item on our agenda is a delegation from Tina Perot from the Sunshine Coast Regional District regarding the SCRD budget.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here today. It's been 3 years since we've done this in person, so it's nice to see everybody's faces. So what we're going to be covering today is just an overview of the round one budget. We're also going to be talking a little bit about our taxation information ahead of time, as well as some of the proposed initiatives that we have coming forward that's implicating these particular impacts. And so some time to ask some questions at the end. From our budget timelines, just on the second slide there, and appreciate we're going low tech today, which I quite enjoy. We had our pre-budget deliberations in December of 2022, and that's a month later than we typically do because of the municipal election that happened in October. Those sessions typically happen in November. Our round 1-2 is also happening a little later, and those deliberations happened on the 23rd to the 25th. And we are now engaged in community presentations, including our member municipalities. On February 13th, we have sessions scheduled, one in person at the SCRD offices as well as one virtual. And so that's for community members to come and ask questions and learn more about our budget. Our round 2 budget is currently scheduled for February the 21st after the long weekend, so we only plan for one day. And again, based on if there's any decisions that want to be revisited, that timeline might change. So just going on to slide 3, what's impacting this year's budget? And so this is just really a general high overview, and you can see that we have over 176 initiatives that are being proposed to be carried over from prior years. And so that's a significant number, with an additional 90 new initiatives that are being presented for consideration as part of the 2023 budget. So that is putting us well almost into the 300 or so range. And this may be a combination of very small budget requests or very large capital infrastructure projects. We have over $5 million in capital upgrades for recreation facilities that is planned for the financial plan for 2023. And this is a result, so it's not necessarily $5 million of new funding, is we have a unique capital renewal model that consistently raises funds on a regular basis, and then we draw from that fund as we need it for specific projects. So we also have several resourcing requests to be able to provide the horsepower to complete some of the projects. So this would be new support staff, or they could be staffing to then maintain any infrastructure that's being proposed. So if we say have something for a new capital like our Church Road well that's coming online, or our parks projects, then we need the staff to maintain those particular resources. We also have increased service costs related to ongoing operations and maintenance of our SCRD facilities and sites. So that is one of the largest cost drivers for our budget this year. So just to highlight some of the key projects that are for services that the town of Gibsons participates in. We've highlighted 6 of them that are of significant value or of interest. One is that our Seaview Cemetery is reaching its expectancy from burials for plots available. So we need to plan for what the future of our cemetery, and all of us participate in this. This is a regional service. So that's a large undertaking that has been ongoing after a comprehensive plan that was done. We also have an increase for green waste facilities, so we're seeing an uptake on that particular program, and so we'd have to put some more tax dollars towards funding that particular program, which is 100% funded through taxation. We also have investment in cybersecurity, and that's just really a changing landscape in the world today, where you may be aware that the SRD had a breach last September, and so we're very well positioned to be up and running within a day, and other organizations are not so fortunate, but it has definitely put a focus on the need to enhance our cybersecurity within our organization, both from an infrastructure and just an awareness and a resourcing perspective. We also have several solid waste facilities upgrade. So over $1 million that's one of the biggest tax impacts for the region, is within the regional solid waste service. So when you look at your service area grid for town of Gibsons, you'll see that from a regional perspective, solid waste services is one of those services that has increased quite significantly over the prior years. So one of those is we do have some upgrades for the transfer station, as well as is securing ongoing power supply to the Seashell landfill. So those are just a few, including the green waste is another one. So again, the board made a decision to increase our BC Transit service, and that was part of the Transit Future Plan that was presented and worked on over the last couple of years. And so that's for Route 90 and enhancing, which is supposed to start in September. But there's lots of other things within BC Transit. So for instance, things through COVID, through regular cleaning initiatives, now are becoming standardized. And so we have to put those in our budget from a permanent position. And so those are mandated through BC Transit. So those are some of the cost pressures to maintaining the service. We also have highlighted some of our capital renewal for recreation facilities, so over a $5 million investment. And in the newspapers, maybe recall, one of the largest projects is for the Gibsons and Area Community Center roof replacement. And that particular one has caught people by surprise, but again, a reminder that those are almost 17-year-old facilities. And those types of roofs are not expected to last past 20 years. And with heat domes and all sorts of weather events, they have not been able to withstand the pressure of that. So it's important that we maintain our assets. So just going on to the next slide of what our preliminary operating budget for the regional district is, and really this just gives a perspective here. We're looking at over a $57 million operating budget, and the most of that going to our recreation and cultural services, so things not just our community recreation facilities, but our libraries, museums, etc., all encompass our recreation and culture. Water and wastewater is also is obviously our largest one, But knowing that the town of Gibsons has their own water service and wastewater, so that it doesn't impact. But it really just shows that how much we've grown, because our budget has over doubled in the last 4 years. So from a capital perspective, the preliminary capital budget is looking to be over 45 million. That's not new investment in the regional district. That's really a carryover of some of those 176 projects that also reflect both of these values. So just carrying on to the Sunshine Coast assessments. Okay, the reason why we highlight this is because they do have an impact on how taxation then translates to our various participants. So as the SRD has 8 participants, Town of Gibsons being one of them, it's important to understand what the impact of assessments has done to the various services that you participate in. So the regional district as a whole, and this includes all of the areas, including the electoral areas, has grown a little less than 1%. And so what that means is growth associated to non-market changes. Increases due to market, so these are taking at a snapshot at the end of July, rose over 10%, which means we're seeing over an 11% growth to assessment values. So in the third bullet, you'll see that without factoring any SCRD taxation, so that means if we didn't raise $1 extra from taxation over the 2022, the impacts related to assessments to the town of Gibsons would mean that your taxes would, your requisition would increase 1.89% over the prior year. And that's because your piece of the pie, whether it be transit or solid waste or recreation services, would have increased, just because your growth and assessments have increased more in relation to other areas of the region. So we just have a very brief slide here just to show our parcel taxes. We talk a lot about property taxation, but one of the other things is our parcel tax. And so for the town of Gibsons, that's only parcel tax that the SCRD levies would be that of the community recreation facilities. And these are, this particular parcel tax is to pay for the debt for the 2 facilities, being Gibsons and Area Community Center and the Seashells aquatic facility, so the 2 newer facilities. Those particular debts are online until 2025, 2026. So turning over to the town of Gibsons and proposed taxation. This may not be counterintuitive in the sense of looking at this where we are talking about the requisition is increasing, but from the tax rate perspective on a $100,000 assessed value, we're actually seeing that the rate for the town of Gibsons is projected to decrease over the prior year. Of course, these are preliminary values because we haven't concluded the budget deliberations. We still have about 22 or so initiatives coming forward for consideration, so these numbers are very draft at this time. But although the overall bottom line percentage increase, and what that means is the amount of requisition over the prior year has increased, or is proposed to increase, the actual tax rates for a user would almost be the same or a little less than the prior year. So what does that mean to the average home value? We've got a couple of different scenarios there, but of course, understanding that the SCRD's portion of the budget only makes a fraction of the overall town of Gibsons, then those would have to be factored into your overall budget for consideration. So where do town of Gibsons dollars go? Essentially, the majority you can see is recreation and culture. And so that is the largest service participant, along with environmental services being regional solid waste. Again, transportation services would be that transit component. So protective services would be the Sunshine Coast Emergency Services, as well as the Gibsons and Area Fire Service as well. So again, they've got lots of capital renewal investment there, and as we can see, protective services is an important service as we deal with over 13 emergencies over the last few years, and probably a 14th now with Rain City. So what's next? Again, we're doing our community information sessions, and we've already had that February 13th. We're going to be presenting some more community dialogues for people to be able to come and ask questions and present information to the public. One will be held virtually in the evening as well. And so to try to meet the needs of people in the community, to be able to ask us some questions and get more informed about our budget. Our round 2 budget deliberations are February 21st, and budget adoption is scheduled for March 23rd at this time. So these are all quite subject to change, and we are happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Looking to council for questions. Councillor Lumley.
Thanks. I had a couple questions, not too detailed, but just maybe some insight. Cemetery expansion, that's a confusing one for me. Like, with the value of land and stuff like that, we're expanding. Like, I guess we still live in an age where, I mean, my father passed away a couple years ago, and to my surprise, he was cremated, and he was like the most old school guy that I thought. And I mean, is there a push to get away from this type of service, or is it like a, because that's a lot of money. Would you not agree about that? I don't know. I mean, it's a philosophical question mainly. Is it the regional districts, like, this is part of the thing, is to provide land for people for cemeteries?
So there's a couple of different components associated with this particular project, and one is to buy more columbariums, so to address the changing needs of burial service in the community. So I know one of the recommendations are very much out of a holistic master plan that was presented last year, and I know there's a lot of questions outstanding as far as what the future of cemeteries are for the Sunshine Coast. But I don't have exactly what the answers are. But yes, this particular part of this particular investment is to purchase more columbariums to meet those needs for not ground burials, but to have a resting place for people who choose alternative means, which also include things like green burials.
Okay, yeah, to me, it just seems like a personal choice, and I know with, like, you can see by budgets, like, increasing, right? Like, I mean, if you looked at it and you said, well, hey, our budget's doubled in the last 4 years, and the population growth in the last 5 years for the regional district has been about 7%. So then you would just ask yourself, you go, whoa, what's happened here? You know, it's like our budget's, doubled, and our population's only grown by 7%. So I'm not sure what answers there are or the reasons being for that, but part of my questioning is just that if we just keep increasing budgets and we just keep hiring more staff and we just say, well, hey, we've got all this stuff to do, at some point we're going to have to become a little bit, more cognizant of. And I'm not. Believe me, it's not. I'm not blaming you, but I just think as a whole, we just have to step back and say, hey, listen, like, what's the tipping point? Like, where are people, if the regional district budget's doubled in 4 years, but there's only 7.3% more people, that means everyone else is just continually carrying the burden of increasing these budgets. That's my fear. My other question was that transportation, Gibsons pays transportation 13%. And I know I asked this question when I was at one of the budget board meetings, because no one in Gibsons is happy with the level of transportation that we get, like, within the town of Gibsons. And I get it. Part of our dealing is that we have to pay for but I mean, for me, the expansion of the transit, and I forget the answer I got. The answer I got at the regional district meeting was something like well, I'm a year too late or something, you know, maybe I should have. But, I mean, I just don't think the needs of Gibsons are being met by the transportation, and 13% of all the taxes going into the regional district. I think the town of Gibsons, I know, because people say it all the time, we're just underserviced here for what the town kind of needs, right? So it's just a large portion of tax dollars going from the town, and it kind of, most people, it's got a bitter taste in their mouth. So that was just a comment. I know that you can't do anything. I get it. It's a big wheel moving around, but I mean, in the future, if we could somehow, you know, look into that before the next expansion, or, hey, where are we gonna spend some dollars, or where are we gonna take dollars away? It might be from Gibsons. So, thanks.
Thanks, and I'll just remind councillors to speak through the chair.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. As I do to the certain regional directors frequently who might be in the audience, so I have to be fair here. Any other questions? Councillor Kroll.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. What I would like to inquire is, two questions. First, with respect to the cemetery, is there more land there as well? Or does the cost of $590K is just for creating vault storage space for cremations?
Without having the full scope here, but my recollection is it's for land development of existing land, so repurposing what is there, so, and making it more, utilizing it more efficiently.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, and another question? And with respect to transportation, which is, I think, on everyone's radar, you know, and we do have problems in Gibsons because of Upper and Lower Village and getting back and forth, but with respect to the delegation that was made by our students on council just recently, there was reference to the UMO card that's coming forward as part of the BC Transit thing. Is there provision in this current budget to align with the potential of incorporating the student transit? So you don't bring out the UMO card and then have to reinvent the wheel to incorporate the opportunity of free student transit, which could be incorporated into existing student cards. So I'm just wondering if there's been any consideration given to that in light of the delegation that was made to the Regional District Board last week.
So, very good delegation. The presenters did an excellent job. And so, without having the transit folks here, I don't know the timing and sequencing of that event. What I did hear is that they are continuing to work with the delegation to understand how that interrelates with the UMA card. So there isn't anything active into our budget this way to consider, because I don't think they know all the answers yet, from my understanding. So I'm not quite sure if it would chicken and egg. I'm not sure. So no, the answer is no. We don't have anything considered in this package from a budget perspective for that consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. I think my concerns obviously align what Councillor Lumley presented, and obviously I understand the need for all these projects to be made, but considering especially the high inflation that we are being hit right now, so there's already 10%. I wonder if, based on these projects, if there's already consideration. I understand that water is maybe not negotiable, so we have to invest in water, but if there's any consideration where the cut should go, just to, I mean, my understanding, based on what you said, is Gibson's
Through the
tax
chair. What I said, or it's just, we need to direct conversation through the chair.
Okay, but what she has said,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, is that Gibson's taxes will not be affected. That's my understanding. But perhaps that's a better understanding that I have to have, because that's what I understood from her presentation. But if there's any consideration of if something's gonna be cut at this point, what it will be.
That's probably, maybe needs to be through the chair since it's to the chair, since it would be a board decision. I don't think the CFO of the SCRD is in any position to speculate upon what the board might decide in round two. I should clarify though that water is something that Gibson, well, you mentioned water, and that's not something that Gibsons is part of what we're being taxed for. That is to all the areas in the regional district that are in regional water.
So perhaps my question is, this has not been considered yet? Because I can see there has been already a cut from 57 to 43. That's my understanding, if I understood correctly.
Well, maybe, could we ask for clarification on that then? The cut from 57 to 43, because I'm not
45,
sure.
45.
Okay. 57 million to 45 million.
Oh, no, one is operating budget.
Yeah,
sorry.
that's the cap, yeah, those are different budgets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry if I can clarify my question, if there has been any consideration in where, if we need to cut, where to go, or this will be all discussed on the next round?
Now, I don't think I'll turn this question back to the CFO. This presentation is based on decisions that have already been made, correct? And there could be more in round two. That's not round two of SCRD budget. This is what the results of round one that's already been adopted into the budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, so these particular figures are a culmination of our pre-budget, which also included the approval of some capital plan funding. And so those are incorporated in here, as well as multiple other types of decisions that have either happened through the year in 2022 or subsequent or in the middle of that, which means things like contract amendments that have happened kind of outside of the budget that need to be ratified before our budget approval because they're maybe to maintain service delivery. So the recommendations that came out of the round one budget have not been adopted by our board. And so they're actually not formalized until that time. So these are very much still in draft and are in draft until we actually amend our bylaw, which is supposed to be done legislatively by March 31st. So we are quite different in the sense that we need to do that. So these are very much subject to change. And so still in draft.
So the increase in those pages doesn't reflect even the round one decisions that have been made, but the projects, the proposed projects some of these might have already been, I think some of these were approved already in round one, some were approved in pre-budget, some are still being considered in round two. They're not actually reflected in the other numbers. Is that correct?
The numbers are reflective of the decisions made during round one.
Okay.
Yes, and so there's about 20 or more projects that have not been approved or incorporated into your, because there's been a deferral of decision of those, so they haven't been included. If I may, Chair, one of the things we have provided though is a what-if scenario, which is trying to say if you make these decisions, what a proposed or what an illustration of the impacts would be. So that is available if someone wanted to see that.
So technically, a lot of these, the numbers here we're actually seeing are decisions that have already been made, and they're not up for discussion. I think some are being brought back for reconsideration, but they're not. There's not really cuts on the table at this point. It's more what we're looking at in round two, whether we decide to go ahead with more expenses or not. That's accurate as an answer. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, through the mayor. Environmental services is representing the third largest in the pie, 15.98%. What would be the comparative increase from that? And in the 2023 proposed budgets, I don't see anything related there to the 15.98%. Is that correct? Can you tell me what? Sorry.
Go ahead.
So the 15.9% related to, I think you're indicating the town of Gibsons, that's their portion of the tax dollars. So that's for solid waste services. So one of the items that was articulated is we have within the slide itemizing the projects. So we have a budget increase for green waste facilities that is part of that particular service. We also have ongoing upgrades to solid waste facilities of over $1 million. We also have some additional decisions. So again, our collective bargaining increases of 2.5% are also impacting some of those values, as well as the contract renewal for the Seashell landfill was approved end of last year. And that was over a $400,000 increase over the prior year's contract. So that is going to be funded majority through taxation. And so that has a significant impact for that particular piece of the pie.
Councillor Lumley.
Thank you. My question, Mr. Mayor, would be how this graph might look, I guess, because we have protective services. How does this look in the future when Gibsons reaches its, like, would Gibsons just pay their extra funds into protective services to the regional district? Or does this
No.
somehow disappear off the off our payment, like our budget, once we hit 5,000 people?
Once we hit 5,000, the policing would be our expense in our budget. And I don't think there's no kind of policing fund expenses challenge, right? This is for fire department and,
Oh, this is it? Okay. Sorry.
yeah.
Thank you.
And then right now it's the province, it's not the SCRD that pays for policing.
pay some.
We pay some, yeah, that's 20 something, or, yeah. Anyway, it's not the SCRD. More questions? I don't know, I did not have this question prepared, but I've got or given you the heads up on this, but we do have the library has asked for a significant increase in their budget. I think it was, and this is something we still need to look at round two, which I know requires further discussion at council. Started out at over 13%. The committee asked that it come back at 6%, kind of more reflective of inflation. And I'm under the understanding they're still asking for over 11%. And the chair and the director of the library have asked to meet with me about this. It's a big concern. And I see Councillor Kroll wants to speak to it too, but I'm wondering if we've worked out what the implications would be on Gibsons alone on that kind of increase, because that's something that council's going to have to deeply consider, like what that increase will cost to the Gibsons taxpayer. Like I know there have been discussions ongoing, but the last budget I saw was still a request of 11.7%. What will that cost the average Gibsons taxpayer and affect our budget?
So I haven't seen the formal budget submission I know it's been forwarded through to, perhaps through the mayor from the library. So we actually, after this meeting, I'm gonna go meet with the library as well.
Yeah.
And one of the other things we're gonna be providing is, we're gonna be providing a staff report on the round two budget as far as what the various impacts to library funding is for each area, including the town of Gibsons. So we'll provide a couple of different
Great.
scenarios as far as what a 6% or what it would look like for the other one. The other part is there's some complicating factors with how funding flows through some of the services for Gibsons Library for that particular service because of how Area D contributes. So again, that does decrease the overall cost to the other service participants, depending on what that decision is. So again, more information at round two to provide more detail on that.
Okay, Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White, and through you, sir. And from what I understand, just sort of peripherally with respect to the ask of the Gibsons Public Library, is back in, when we received COVID relief money, we made a one-time donation to the library so they could upgrade some of their facilities to deal with cleaning, to deal with extra washroom types of taps they had to put in and one thing and another to deal with COVID. And I think it was an amount of something like $17,000, if I remember.
19,800, yeah.
So that somehow got into their budget, and it seems to have skewed the map, which makes it
Yeah,
look like they're really asking for more. It's like somehow that 19,000 should have been treated as a separate sum.
well, no, I think what happened is, I don't know if those capital projects, I guess that's something both the CFO and I might need to find out in our afternoon meetings, but I don't know if those capital projects went ahead. What we're hearing from the library is instead that close to $20,000 was rolled into their operational budget. Whereas, so a one-time grant was used to fund ongoing operations. So that puts us in a very challenging situation to now we have to fund this. Now the SCRD needs to fund the Gibsons ongoing grant on an ongoing basis. It doesn't really work that way. It would have been fine if that funding went towards capital costs as we were initially led to believe. But it sounds like other priorities took over and that money went into operations, and now the library is looking to the SCRD to fund that same amount on an ongoing basis, along with maybe 60,000 in additional funding. I think it's around 89,000 is what they're asking for now, in addition. Yeah. So anyway, more discussion to be had on that topic. So thank you for your presentation. I'll continue to be reporting to council on how the SCRD budget is going and getting council's input on how we should vote and provide input at the SCRD board. And thank you to the directors and CAO for attending this meeting as well. So next on the agenda is our administration reports, and our Director of Infrastructure Services has item 4.1, a report on an award for contract of water main construction. And I think it's here as written. I hope everyone's had an opportunity to look over this. It's pretty straightforward, and this is one of the core reasons why we needed to have this meeting, because it is timely. We need to make this decision due to the procurement process. I don't know if there's any brief introduction that the director.
Thank you, Mayor White. I can provide a brief introduction.
Sure.
In December, the town posted a request for proposal for construction services to install new water mains on Venture Way and Cascade Crescent, and to replace a pressure-reducing valve on Creekside Crescent. Scope of work in the RFP also included active transportation upgrades on Venture Way and Payne Road, and an option to repave the full width of Venture Way from Payne Road to the corner where Venture Way turns south towards Highway 101. The RFP closed with 5 proposals received. The proposals were evaluated by a team of staff, including input from Urban Systems, and based on the criteria outlined in the RFP, NB Contracting was selected as the preferred proponent, providing best value for money. Staff recommend that a contract be awarded to NB in the amount not to exceed $885,000 to complete the full scope of work. This includes contingencies of 20% on the waterworks, 10% on the active transportation upgrades, and 10% on paving. This is within the allocated budget for all 3 items. Alternative options with a reduced scope of work have been provided in this report. However, there are significant efficiencies to be lost if portions of the work are not completed at this time. Thank you, and we welcome any questions.
Questions from council? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. the portion that's allocated for the active transportation network upgrades, is that matching what is on our town website? Is that the same strategy that's in the current mapping? So what's being suggested here in the price allocated to it, is that what is written in that section of our active transportation network? I just want to make sure I have an understanding of if we're going to be meeting up those connecting dots that are on that particular map.
Yeah, through you as mayor. To be honest, I'm not sure what is on our website. I haven't checked that personally, so I'd have to confirm that with you. It is consistent with the grant application. The funding for that is through the grant that was received for active transportation. So the pool of money to fund that is the same grant that was for the active transportation upgrades on Venture and Payne, on Marine Drive, and on Glassford Road. I would have to assume that that would be consistent with what would be on the website, but I would need to confirm that for you.
Okay, any more questions? Councillor DeAndrade?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my question would be on the same line. So obviously it makes sense to approve this project the way it is. But my concern is if we approve, we're going to have now only 475 for the next 3 projects in active transportation, right? Marine Avenue, Glassford Road, and Gower Point. So the question is, would be this enough to complete the 3 projects, which the grant, the application was for the 4 projects? And if it's not, what's the plan? And if there's a prioritizing, which one?
Sure, good question, and I'll touch on that. Did we not already approve Marine? Maybe not. Maybe that was just a specific part of the Marine part. Yeah, okay, yeah, that was only, okay, so.
Thank you. Through you as mayor, I believe that the amount that's recommended for award is slightly above what was budgeted for this particular section of the project. I think it was about 10% higher than what the budgeted amount in the grant application was. Having not been involved with the grant application, I don't know what level of contingency was included within that. I would expect that 10%, 10 to 15% would have been kind of the contingency that would have been included in the grant application. I think consistent with the pricing that was received for the Marine Drive portion of the work, I have a level of confidence that there is enough budget sufficient left to remain for the remaining portions, being Glassford Road and Gower Point Road. That is an unknown, though, until pricing is received for that. And given that the final design for the Glassford Road is still to be presented, I guess there is a level of uncertainty, but it's not outside of the realm or the range of what was budgeted for. So I think that there's a level of confidence there.
Sure.
So the next question is, what happens if it is, we don't have enough funding? So in terms of implication with the grantor, because I know we have to respond, and what does it leave us? Do we just don't complete the project, or do we have extra funding?
I think just like this project has been within the budget with the contingency, the others will have to be as well for what they've been budgeted for.
Okay.
They can't go over budget. And this one can't either by more than 10% by the amount of contingency.
Okay, so this 180 is within the budget. There was just a slight, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Kroll?
I'd like to move the recommendation on page 5.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? The motion carries. Thank you, Director. And I'll ask you to briefly introduce the next item, which was also a timely item that we needed to have this grant application in front of us due to time constraints. Could you briefly?
Thank you, Mayor. The Community Emergency Preparedness Fund is a suite of funding programs that intends to enhance the resilience of local governments, First Nations, and communities in responding to emergencies. Funding is provided by the province of BC and is administered by the UBCM. The CEPF grant fund has multiple funding streams, including the disaster risk reduction, climate adaptation, it's a bit of a mouthful, DRRCA funding stream, which is intended to support applicants to reduce risk from future disasters due to natural hazards and climate-related risks. In 2014, KWL completed an assessment of the foreshore in Gibsons between Armours Beach and Atlee Beach and identified the need to rehabilitate the sections between Armours and the public wharf due to signs of erosion and degradation from tide and wave action. The nature of this rehabilitation aligns with the DRRCA grant program, and preparations are underway to prepare a grant application for this stream. The grant would 100% fund costs up to a maximum of $2 million, which, based on cost estimates from Urban Systems, will be sufficient to complete the foreshore rehabilitation. The grant submission requirements include a council resolution, or rather council resolutions for the following: support for the application in general, commitment to fund any costs that exceed the $2 million grant funding limit, and commitment of staff resources to provide overall grant administration. The recommendations in this report align with the grant requirements. Thank you, and we welcome any questions.
Okay, questions? Councilor DeAndretti?
Thank you, Mayor. That's very exciting. It addresses a lot of, potential addresses a lot of the issues on the foreshore. I think I would like just a clarification how we will deal with the project itself, because the project is from 2014, so 9 years old in terms of climate data. So if there's any intention to update the project. Also, we are updating 3 DPAs, which are our climate resilient DPAs, DPA 1, 2, and 9. And we have the seed-to-source project findings. So my question is, if all these updates and even updating the 214 will be considered without we make any improvements, because it seems that we have kind of old data in a way.
I don't know if who would be best to answer this question. There's DPAs in the planning department. There's the 2014 project that I know our CAO is familiar with, so hopefully our CAO can enlighten us in that.
Yeah, maybe I'll start, Mr. Mayor, with your permission.
Go ahead.
We don't believe that the data is old, other than, so the engineering, it was for like a 75-year span or 2100 scenario. And so that data hasn't changed. I think we'd have to have some current engineering design for related to the sewer services that we're improving as well. But I don't expect that the wall that was imagined in the habitat works and stuff, that any of that will change, because of ultimately the current design. We see ourselves in a scenario where we're having detailed engineering design. We would have to meet our flood construction levels and everything that we already have today. So that's how I would be seeing that. Now, the question around the development permits, I don't know if we want to address that in some form. But would you mind repeating that question around the DPs? It's just sort of what happens with or without the DP updates, or?
Thank you. I think even though I understand what you mentioned about the 2014 climate data, but there has been some change in climate data that could change slightly or can change, I don't know, 20 centimeters or something. So I think it's important to check that. At the same time, there has been changing in making better best management guidelines for the environment, for erosion control perhaps. So I think my concern that we initiate an improvement without receiving the updates.
I think what I heard from the CAO is that would be integrated into this work, is to have to update the work that was done in 2014. And I see Director Rutley might be able to
if I may, through as mayor, the design in 2014, KWL assessed that there was a need for foreshore protection in that area and provided some conceptual design. So the next step now is then to take that conceptual design and turn it into a fully realized engineering design based on the current standards for design and the current understood flood construction level and other potential climate impacts. And to incorporate best practice for work in the foreshore and more of a naturalized slope versus a hardened slope. Those are all of the considerations that will go into advancing this from a conceptual design that's acknowledged that almost 10 years old to a current design that we would then advance forward for construction.
Okay. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. My understanding is what we're doing is just giving you approval to apply for the funding of $2 million for the foreshore improvement between these two sites. So all the implications that Councillor Dendretti is referring to obviously are going to be, if we get the funding, they're going to be incorporated into how we move forward. Way back when, probably 2019, when we were doing the AAP for the Press Road lift station, one of the questions that came up was how long can we maintain a sewer line at sea level? My bigger concern is there any aspect of this funding that could be used to consider relocation of that sewer line? Or is it just strictly for foreshore?
Through you as mayor, unfortunately, this funding stream is strictly related to directly climate-related impacts in the naturalized environment. That question was presented to Urban Systems, and having reviewed the application guideline as well, it does not cover any utility-type work. So unfortunately, the replacement of that would not be included within the funding stream. We have analyzed the options of replacing in place versus relocating to what the alternative location would be on Marine Drive. The cost estimate for replacement in place is roughly $640,000. To relocate up to Marine is, I believe the rough estimate was $1.2 million, and that didn't include asphalt restoration. So I would estimate that it would easily be in the $2 million range.
Yeah, so Councillor Kroll has a follow-up, and then Councillor Lumley.
I think the Director of Infrastructure sort of alluded to probably what my follow-up is, if climate change continues on the route it's going, it's going to become apparent that we are ultimately probably going to have to be relocating that sewer line. So I'm glad that it's on your radar and that, we're keeping track of funds on it.
Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, my question would be like latecomer agreements. I know that section there's developments, people wanting to develop, not that they're going to, but is there an opportunity to recover some of the costs for the sewer through latecomer agreements?
Around planning, infrastructure, CAO, finance even, maybe.
I can take an attempt to answer this question through you as mayor. My understanding through the Local Government Act, I believe that's where the kind of requirements around or the guidelines around latecomer agreements are through the Local Government Act. I don't believe that this type of asset replacement would qualify if we were upsizing the main for future growth or future development potential, or if it was a extension of a new line in front of previously unserviced properties. That's where the opportunity would be to recoup funds through a latecomer agreement. I don't believe that a strict asset replacement due to aging would qualify for any cost recovery in that way.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. A question or moving to? Okay, another question.
I think I just want to, I didn't fully understand if we are successful, this project is coming back to the consent table. And if it's not, if staff will wait for the updates of the 3 DPAs. And also if there will be consideration with the fact that the town is growing, potentially gonna be 10,000 people, tourism is growing, and actually active transportation users are also increasing. So I'm considering if there will be an evaluation, if there will be a need to expand the sidewalk. So these are questions that are, so if this is coming back to council, I'm happy to discuss later, but I just want to have the assurance whether, if we don't discuss later, if that's the path that, could you confirm if it will be
Look
coming
at the
back?
CAO, yeah, it's kind of a big, I don't know.
It will certainly come back to council and we'll have an opportunity to address those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Crowell?
I'd like to move the motion on page 9 of the agenda that staff pursue this grant opportunity to the tune of $2 million.
Thank you, and seconded by Councillor DeAndretti. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Yeah, the motion carries. And next on the agenda is RGA bylaw enforcement. I guess this is a verbal report by me. So it's, the recommendations are from the mayor as well. And that we have relevant staff in the audience to have a bit of a discussion on what the concerns are and what possible solutions are. I think, right, we do have certain issues and solutions that Councillor Thompson may be in a conflict on, so it kind of depends on what we're talking about. So we need to consider that as we structure this conversation. I think maybe what would help is to start with the 90 days conversation, which is easier for Councillor Thompson to stay with us, I think, right? I mean, it's up to you about where you feel you're in a conflict, and I'll look to you.
Yeah, I agree,
there's-
to stay for that portion.
Okay.
Thank you.
So instead of running in and out all the time, maybe we'll go to the 90 days concern. And we have received, we did receive a letter regarding the concern about the 90 consecutive days enforcement. My recommendation is it's kind of general wording to just revision this section. It was written right into the bylaw, the word consecutive, but there was a lot of confusion out there the way it was communicated in different terms of 3 months or 3 consecutive months or 90 days or 90 consecutive days. And I don't know, I wasn't around during the full discussion, but I know that there were times when it was expressed in different ways in the past year or so that this was being discussed. And I know I've heard concerns from residents other than the person who wrote the letter. And one concern I have is about just the philosophy of that particular bylaw, RGA bylaw approach, which was that the town's, I think council's hope was to really rely on the Stream 1 RGAs, which are people who live in their homes and maybe leaving for a certain amount of time, or maybe renting out a room in their homes, but they're still there as the primary resident, and really focusing on that and encouraging that as a way for tourist accommodation in town. Yet, as the person who wrote the letter recently expressed very well, it actually makes it very hard. That the word consecutive makes it very hard for people to do that. It makes it kind of limits the opportunities to people who are snowbirds, essentially, who are leaving for a long period of time, for 3 months or more, and then maybe they can rent out the 3 months if they're leaving for 6 months or whatever. Whereas, a family that might be going away for spring break for a week and then might be going away another time for a couple weeks during the summer, they don't qualify under the word consecutive. So that's been a challenge I've heard in the community. And that's why I've suggested we revisit it. But I kind of put that out to staff, that general wording, because I know that word consecutive is actually in the bylaw. And I haven't been able to check in with staff in the last couple of days about whether that would require an actual bylaw amendment to remove the word consecutive, or if there could be a consideration of waiving enforcement for a period of time on that as a motion of council, or if there's another way procedurally that council can deal with this consecutive challenge if it is the will. Okay, I've got the Director of Planning with the hand up first.
Thank you, Mayor, for that question. So the consecutive, it is written into the zoning bylaw, so 3 consecutive months in a calendar year. And the intention around that was for 2 reasons. One was to sort of identify what makes it somebody's principal residence. So how long does somebody have to live in that house for it to be their principal residence? And council came to the agreement that 9 months of the year was enough. So that was one consideration. The other consideration was for enforcement. So what we heard a lot from the community on is if we develop these bylaws, they have to be enforceable and they have to be easy to enforce. And so the 3 consecutive month component was in order to enforce a number of residential guest accommodation business licenses, we would have to look at each license to identify which 3 months they were going to be away. So if we did get a complaint, we'd have to look in the file and find out what those months were. If they are not consecutive, I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. If they're not consecutive, they could choose like 3 months of the year. That would also make enforcement easier, not as easy as 3 consecutive months, but easier. But 90 days didn't ever come up. So we've always said months just to keep that enforcement component straightforward. But absolutely, if council wants to change that, it would be an amendment to the zoning bylaw.
Okay. So there's no, I just want to check with the CAO and corporate officer, because that was a conversation that we did have. I want to confirm that there's no way to kind of do a waiving enforcement on that, because I know that's been done in the past. It would be an amendment. But I don't know. I know we've all been very busy and it's been hard to,
have that answer.
we haven't been able to look into that at this stage. Okay. Are there any other councillor concerns or,
I think my concerns are
onto this,
my concerns are the same as the Director of Planning, because I was thinking, how can we reinforce, right? And so, I don't know.
Okay, well, I mean, I could see right now, I understand when residents apply for their business license for Stream 1, they're asked to dictate which 90 consecutive days they'll be away. So, another way of doing it would be to say what days overall in the year are you planning to be away? And the people would have to announce it ahead of time. And I would not see our bylaw enforcement department having to every single day needing to check on this, but it'd be a little more of an honor system where people have committed to this. If they're found to be renting their place out for whatever reason on a day when they haven't actually recorded it to the town, just like the 90 consecutive days, then they'd be found to be in not being following the bylaw and would be fined, just like if it were 90 days, 90 or consecutive days. But it would need to be an acceptance that this isn't black and white enforcement, that we can't accept our staff to be looking at it every single day. But on the 9 months, 3 months piece, I guess my real concern is that it's an encouragement of making this bylaw really oriented towards people who are away for like 3 months of the year, have homes in other parts of the world that they're going to, and for the families who also own homes, so they're still still doing better than a lot of people in our community. They can't, but they still can't actually qualify for Stream 1, and I know a lot of them are struggling with trying to figure out how they fit into this bylaw that is actually encouraging people to rent out their rooms in their homes or their homes when they're away, but now they can't. And I think technically ironically, they'd probably have to apply for Stream 2, which is if they just want to go away for spring break and another 2 weeks in the summer, which doesn't really make a lot of financial sense because they'd be having to pay $3,500 or something in order to do that. So they'd have to apply for the temporary use permit, go through the temporary use permit process, and they'd also have to apply for the business license. So that'd be quite an expense. So hence the concern. Do other councillors want to speak to this? Okay. So I just want to check in on now the motion is to revisit this. That's vague wording. So I think the intent is to see how we could hear from staff about what we could do about this challenge. And it sounds like it would require an actual bylaw amendment. Yeah. So, go ahead.
And Mayor, I think what I would like to, because I agree, bylaws are only good if they are reinforceable. Otherwise, they become this problematic thing that maybe a neighbor would say, oh, they are doing more than 90 days because I count. So I would like when staff presents, if there's a way of how we are going to deal with that, because that's the part I understand the 90 days. I feel completely comfortable in this regard, but how do we deal when we have complaints for whatever reason, but someone that's coming forward and say, wow, these people are really doing way more. How do we deal with that? So if there's a plan of how to deal with that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I would see that would be the easiest thing. If somebody in the community actually complained, then that would trigger bylaw enforcement to have a look at it. And then if they saw that this somebody's renting out their place in one of the dates they didn't submit to the town, then it would be a clear infraction. Whereas I really don't see proactive bylaw enforcement really working here in having to police every one of these every day. But if there was a complaint, that would be a definite way to do it. Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor White. I don't really have a concern with the 90 days, 3 months one way or another, as you sort of alluded to. If people can afford to go away for a 3-month holiday and to wherever or what. My concern with respect to the bylaw, and I know ultimately we're probably going to be reviewing it, is that people who are currently faced with having to sell their homes and leave the community because they physically cannot afford to live here anymore without the income they were receiving through short-term rental. And, under the Condominium Act, there's what they call the hardship clause that, exceptions can be made. I don't think this is the time or place to explore that, but I think some of these cases we need to perhaps review with staff and see if we can find some common ground rather than losing valuable community members.
That might be even more relevant to talk about in the next motion. I mean, from my perspective, for sure, because I know that's affected a lot of the building inspections that are really causing people to realize they can't afford this anymore. Councillor Thompson?
I think the consecutive 3 months. So really, what's happening now then is people are applying in that stream. They specify their 3 months, so January, February, March. So it would be just, the suggestion would change that instead of stating the consecutive months, it would be a matter of stating January, April, August. So really then, the only pressure would be on the bylaw officer as to the amount of work that it would be to patrol the stated first dates or the stated second dates. If it was no stress on the bylaw officer, to me, you know, I think that seems very similar.
That would be, I think, an excellent way to deal with it, because otherwise, I mean, if it were kind of split up as 90 days, then, and people were picking and you know, deciding ahead of time which weekend and this weekend and that they're going to rent the place, and that's kind of a rat's nest that would be very difficult. Like, you wouldn't be able to proactively enforce that at all. It would have to be a matter of someone actually lodging a complaint and then having to check later. But yeah, if it were splitting up like the months like that, I could see that as being more reasonable. And some of these people who are wanting to rent out during spring break, in addition to a couple times in the summer, they could have their 3 months easily that way. CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to make sure, so just the way that the second motion is there, do you envision sort of a motion from council that we prepare a short report on the two options? And how do we deal with the enforcement portion of that as well? Because we could do that as
The two options as in,
sort of amending the zoning bylaw. So I think there's sort of, don't want to put words in your mouth, but sort of in a, what would be the scenario if we were to change the 90 days to be non-consecutive? Can that be done through a motion from council, an overriding motion, or can that be done, does it require a process to amend the zoning bylaw? And while we're doing that, you could probably comment on how do we enforce that now, and how would we enforce in a scenario where it's on a complaint basis only and so on. So just want to make sure that we're
that
capturing
sounds
that
like it
correctly.
would work. And then, yeah, I mean, I think it would be good to have that amendment prepared to come to council as well, which would simply be removing the word consecutive. That's easy. Like, it would just be a language without the word consecutive, so that council could choose to go ahead with that if they want to when that report comes forward. That's
If you want
sounds
to
reasonable,
consider
right?
such a motion, then we would certainly.
okay.
entertain
So
that.
that's how staff would take direction on that motion. Is there anyone who wants to move the motion? Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Kroll. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed to the motion? The motion carries. So now I'd like to deal with that first recommendation, which pertains to building licenses, building inspections and safety inspections.
Mayor, I will recuse myself on this for the same reasons as previous.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thompson. So the reason for this recommendation, and it's less general, it's more specific. But again, I think it's helpful to just generate some discussion about some of the troubleshooting opportunities we have where there are residents who are having difficulties with this bylaw and are having consequences to it that they didn't realize were going to be they were going to have to deal with. And this one specifically, which I've heard a number of times from people in our community, and I know other councillors have too. And again, as Councillor Kroll alluded to, a lot of these people are people who are a little more challenged financially, and they're I've heard stories of people who are quite challenged in the current economic environment where they ended up buying their homes at a time when it was very expensive to buy homes. Some of them have lived here a long time. Some of them are literally single mothers, as we've heard from a number of community members concerned about these people, and then made the decision or felt they really needed to pay their expenses and mortgage in order by pursuing short-term rentals. And I want to be really clear, that's a risky decision to make. It's not something that was ever certain income by any means. It was people were making these decisions because during a time when the certainty of this being a business was gray at best. Like it was, there was no regulation, there was no clear future. There was, if anything, the town for the last 8 years or so has said that they're going to be, or 5 years, I guess, reviewing this bylaw and could be making it, could potentially even just eliminate all possibilities of short-term rentals. So I want to be clear. Regardless of whether it's somebody who was in a very strong economic position or not, they were making kind of a risky business proposition that could have ended any day, really. And so it's hard to kind of hear people come to us now and say, well, you're taking my livelihood away, because it's always been gray at best. This is a income opportunity, but at the same time, I think we need to recognize that economic circumstances for quite a number of people in our community are pretty challenging right now, with inflation, with variable mortgages, and some people who are struggling to make incomes and make ends meet are talking about needing to leave town and sell their homes, as Councillor Kroll mentioned earlier. So probably the circumstance that I hear about most often is that the RGA process is triggering building inspections, and it's because of the council's decision to pursue temporary use permits as the way to do these RGAs. If a lot of other communities have a business license where people are given business licenses only, and in that case, there's not like a whole new permitting process, or a temporary use permit requires a building inspection, which is the way that our staff has interpreted this, which is understandable because temporary use permits, I believe, always trigger building inspections, no matter, maybe not, but this is my understanding anyway. Hopefully we'll get some clarification. But yeah, really the consequence has been quite a number of people have had to apply for building permits, sometimes for suites that they've had for years and years and years, and were even registered secondary suites with the town of Gibsons, where they were paying extra sewage, extra garbage rates because they had secondary suites, and they felt that, I was already registered, so why now do I need a building permit? But that's been the case, and for those building permits to come up to code or to be issued, people are being quoted thousands and thousands of dollars, upwards, sometimes 5 figures, and a lot of them are saying can't afford this anymore, and we don't know why this is necessary. And I have had a look at some other municipalities. Seashelt, for example, uses that language of bad circumstance. They said bad circumstances will be noted. I thought we could approve that by saying unsafe circumstances. If the bylaw enforcement officer were to go, because it is very explicitly in the bylaw that we need safety. There are safety provisions in the bylaw around fire especially, around the need for fire extinguishers, the need for a sign or map saying what the fire safety plan is, among a number of other things. So and then there's a checklist which is right in the bylaw too, I believe, that everybody needs to fill out to ensure their place is fire safe. So all that is really clear that people have to do. So this proposal is essentially, and it's similar to what I understand other municipalities have been doing, which is really focusing on those safety inspections. And if a bylaw enforcement officer were to go and do those safety inspections and find that something was also like considerably unsafe, like then that would trigger a further building inspection. But otherwise, that would not be needed. That's kind of what I'm hoping to accomplish with this. On the other hand, I know what we'll likely hear from staff is that some people are already talking about going ahead with doing renovations and improvements, people who can afford it. And that kind of puts us in a bind because it's like, can we move forward with a bylaw or a motion like this, where some people are actually wanting to, what are those implications on those people? So that's, I'll look to council too, but the director can respond to this as well, unless others want to put forward concerns for the director off the bat. Okay. Councillor Lumley?
My question's for you, I guess. Are we just gonna keep cherry picking like certain things in this bylaw and saying, well, this isn't fair, I'd like to change this, or can we just maybe amend maybe take a look at the whole bylaw and make it fair for everybody? I don't agree with your assessment. I think it's like STRs, or whatever, Airbnb, whatever. It's a legitimate business opportunity for people. It's a viable business opportunity. And I think a lot of people took that and were happy with it. And I mean, it's all over the world. I mean, I've traveled everywhere and stayed in Airbnbs, and these are these people's businesses. So I feel bad for those people that are really struggling because we took their livelihood away, and that's what we did. And I think that's what we have to look at. It has to be fair. And of course, there's the trickle-down effect with the reduction of so many Airbnbs in this area, in a tourist accommodation area, that there's nowhere to take up the slack. So I hope the other businesses won't be offended by the lack of people staying within the town. They'll probably still find a place to stay, maybe Hopkins Landing or something, but I mean, we're just really being unfair to the citizens of Gibsons that took up this opportunity. So anyway, that was just a comment. I mean, I agree with all this, but I just hope we're not gonna go, hey, what about this? Hey, what about this? Like, cause I think the fees are too high. I think there's so many things in here that are, and you're right, like somebody can afford, somebody can afford to go away for 3 months and rent their house out, but then somebody else
Can't,
like
so we
those are-
penalize the people who can't, yeah.
I know, but it's like, it's just not fair, and there's more than just these two things, so if we could immediately fix and then say, okay, let's really take a deep dive in it, because I want to, that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, I feel like the timing of the bylaw made it impossible to completely write a new one.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to. I apologize. And if I can quote the former mayor, he said, let's let the next council deal with it, right? So I think then we should listen to that and deal with it.
Somebody didn't like your take on that?
You want me to step outside?
Well, our CAO is boldly. Nobody's there?
Go. There's a big hole there, so nobody fell down.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Okay. I see two hands there, both at the same time.
Okay.
Okay, then I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay, opportunity for comments. Obviously, I would like to hear from the possibilities, whatever it is. But I agree. I think our intention, at least that's how I felt, was not, I think we didn't understand that it would trigger the business inspector. I think we thought about safety.
Building, yeah.
So is the concern. To the point that Council Lumley made, I wonder if we can take the opportunity to also, I don't know if we can address everything, but I thought that the issue with fee is also a big issue because I felt like unfair. So, you have a small unit and you're paying the same as someone that has a giant house and in 1 or 2 days. So I wonder if there's enough time to, send this back, or this is more urgent and we need to take some time to look at ideally we should look at everything at once. At least these two aspects right now.
Councillor Kroll, yeah, I have a response to that, and Councillor Lumley as well, but I'll.
Thank you, Mayor White. The comment I made earlier is, one of the issues with the process is the definition of principal residence, and we have situations where we're dealing with the process. We spent a lot of time getting to the bylaw, and some of the concerns that Councillor Lumley has mentioned and Councillor Andretti. The big issue is obviously safety at the end of the day. It is there are people who are quite prepared to pay their fees, pay the business license fee, but suddenly they're in a situation where they're non-compliant. In that gray area you referred to earlier, they have been operating for a number of years. You referenced income. Banks will not accept revenue from short-term rental as funding to support a mortgage. So, anyone, it's, all I'm looking for, is there an opportunity that some of these people who, because of the smallest sort of, they almost need a variance to comply with their short-term rental bylaw. And that's sort of the awkward area that, that I was looking to. Can we find some area that we could find some common ground to work with some of these people? It's a TUP process, so the maximum under our current bylaw that they're going to be allowed to do it is for 5 years. And that's only if they choose to renew. So, if they meet safety, if, their building is, it's not a shack that they're trying to rent out, that it's a safe place, can we find some common ground to work with some of these people who currently, are going through a lot of angst and anguish and, potentially leaving the community, which would be unfortunate in some of these cases.
Yeah, so that was my intent with this, and it was done by months and months, of listening, of people who were having concerns and hearing that their place would not be compliant, and I hear the concern about cherry picking, but this is really, the biggest thing I hear all the time from people is this is how the bylaw is having unintended consequences, is the trigger of a building inspection, and a lot of other things, like I feel that we can't. Like this bylaw will need to be reviewed leading up to the expiration of the first temporary use permits on December 31st, 2024. That's the intent there, of looking at the whole bylaw and changing it. But other than that, the way that this bylaw has come into effect right at the beginning of this term has been that it's already, it's impossible to kind of repeal it and start over again, and I feel like that's a decision we already made as a council, and the previous really the previous council made that decision, and the process has gone ahead, and it's kind of hard to go back and say. I mean, we've issued 22 licenses and people have paid for most of them. It's I think we need, if we want to look at building a whole new bylaw, that needs to be probably spring 2024, leading up to the expiration of those permits. But right now, I really, I look at this this change is something that could be significant for a lot of people, and I'll look for the Director of Planning to speak to it.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a few comments. First of all, just back to the process. So the very beginning, if somebody comes in and applies for a business license, first we would check to see, say it's in their home, if it's in a single-family dwelling. If they've got a building permit for their single-family dwelling, there's no trigger for a building inspection. They can get their residential guest accommodation business license through the licensing inspector, so through our bylaw enforcement office. As part of the licensing process, the bylaw enforcement officer does do an inspection. It is not a safety inspection. So their role is not to be looking at the BC building code, looking at the fire code. That's the role of the building official or the fire prevention officer. So the licensing inspector would go on site to make sure what's being proposed is actually what's happening. So if someone says we're renting out 2 bedrooms in our home, they're going to make sure that there are 2 bedrooms. If they have a parking plan and they show where the parking is, they're going to look and make sure that the parking is where they said it's going to be. So it's very much a ground truthing process, that licensing inspector's role. If somebody has a secondary suite that they've been renting out as an RGA, they apply through the temporary use permitting process, which is the non-principal dwelling process. And we get an application, we look through the files, a building permit, see that they never had a building permit for their secondary suite. That's what triggers the need to get a building permit. So we can't issue a license for something that is not authorized by the town. So once they're coming to us, to the town, asking for a business license, we need to make sure when we issue those business licenses, it meets the building code, it meets the zoning regulations, it meets the fire code. So we have a referral process for that. So not all of the TUPs have had to get building permits. Not all of, well, under Stream 1, in your main home, I don't believe any of those needed building permits. So it's just a few of the TUPs that have triggered building permits. And it is hard because they are old existing dwellings that were renovated, put in secondary suites, and then they're coming to us for a license. So before we can authorize a license, we do need to make sure that they are safe and that they are brought up to code, which is where the cost does come in. So it does affect that Stream 2 category the most, which is the non-principal residence short-term rental. If they didn't come to the town asking for a business license, they could continue renting out their secondary suite that was converted after they got their building permit. So it's when they're coming to us and asking for a business license, that's what's triggering this process. So I just wanted to clarify that inspection process. The other piece, so the licensing officer won't be noting unsafe circumstances. It's not their role to be looking at whether there's a 2-hour fire separation, what the width of the size of the window, whether it meets building code. That's not at all what they're doing. Not even, is that the right smoke detector? They're not looking at that. They're looking at ground truthing the application with what was applied for. And they're also making notes. For example, is it in a secondary suite? Is it in a garden suite? Is it in an entire single family dwelling? And that the main purpose of that inspection is to collect that data for the evaluation in a year and a half from now. When we're collecting all that information, we can kind of correlate, where are we finding these secondary suites? Are they in investment properties? Are they in, a home on someone's property, a secondary suite? So that's part of the data collection for the evaluation of the program. And then in terms of these existing short-term rentals, we never did issue business licenses for these because they were not allowed in the first place. So before we even brought in these regulations, we allowed bed and breakfasts, which were allowed in a dwelling, and they were not allowed in secondary suites. So even though some people have operated short-term rentals in secondary suites as bed and breakfast, they were never actually allowed under zoning. So there's no grandfathering of these uses or anything like that. So we can't just, because somebody has one, it doesn't mean that it hasn't been authorized by the town. So we can't sort of pick and choose which ones were existing and which ones weren't. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I think I saw Councillor Kroll first.
Thank you, Mayor White. This is more to Councillor Lumley's point. I believe at the onset of this, the licensing fees and the fees involved were set to try and recover the costs that we incurred in getting to the point where we eventually had a bylaw. So it was a fairly expensive process. I believe it was around 30,000 that by the time with all the consultants and one thing and another that the costs we incurred, and we're looking at trying to offset that cost.
2 consultants? Yeah, way higher, way higher. Go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. Just about the fee component. So the business license fee for a residential guest accommodation under the zoning that's allowed, under Stream 1, it's $200 for an annual business license. So it's the same, it's a pretty standard fee. It's not that much. If they wanted so if they wanted to rent 2 bedrooms in their home for the year and they wanted to rent when they're away, it's $200 per each of those licenses. So it could be up to $400. Right now, we've only got five applications who want to rent their whole house for 3 months of the year, and 13 business licenses have been issued for 1 or 2 bedrooms in their home. So that's as of today. The temporary use permit, so that's the entire home, your non-principal residence, so that's either your secondary suite or your garden suite or your investment property somewhere. Those are $2,000 a year for a business license. So that's where the cost is really kicking in. And then that temporary use permit process where we bring all the applications to council, that's a $1,500 application fee. So the total for the first year is $3,500 for the TUP. And then the next year, it would be $2,000. But that's for the entire house year round.
Councillor DeAndretti?
It's just because I was following the director of planning at one point, I think I just want to make sure that I fully understand. So let's say I'm going to use my house. My house, I don't know if there was a permit when someone built 40 years ago, but if I decide to rent some rooms, would it trigger a building inspector?
Through the mayor. So if you got a permit to build your home, which you probably did if it was 4 years ago, and you wanted 40? Oh, okay, well, hopefully you did 40 years ago, you probably did. So if you wanted to rent out a bedroom in your home, it's always been a bedroom in your home, you would apply for a business license, and that would likely not trigger a building inspection unless you have renovated your home, put an addition on, or it was a cellar and you changed it into a bedroom. So if you had done some alteration or some renovation to your home, it could trigger an inspection. If it had always been a bedroom in your home, then that wouldn't trigger a building inspection, but it would. All new licenses for residential guest accommodation will trigger a licensing inspector to come.
So I was trying to look at other municipalities for solutions to this issue that people were raising with us, or people have been raising with us. Other municipalities do use the language safety inspection just to refer to somebody going in to make sure there's a fire escape plan and making sure there's fire extinguishers, not to look at, measure the windows and that kind of thing. So that was the intent of using that word. It was more at that level, just to make sure there's language in the bylaw about that too, like just about those. So I could see that simply being changed to licensing inspections. The other piece was Seashelt is the neighboring municipality that says that during those licensing inspections, maybe the person who does them might see something very significant that a building inspector might have to look at, like that, not measuring things, but, and in that case, they said bad circumstances might be noted in order to trigger a building inspection. That part could be dropped completely, if that's too much to ask. I thought it could be something that would be useful, but another thing that would trigger building inspections would certainly be any complaints, like neighbor complaint or something about any complaint in the community. I think that would always have to trigger a. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, a complaint would typically be responded to by the bylaw enforcement officer, so not, again, not the building officials. They do inspections based on building permits. So
Right.
once a permit comes in and they're processing it, they would inspect that.
So if somebody complained that, say, a building, accessory building was too close to the property line, then that would not be a building inspection. That would be the bylaw enforcement coming in, and
Bylaw enforcement.
it would still be. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Cole, did I see you put your?
It's sort of an awkward situation all around. Mayor White just referenced the situation with presumably a garden suite, which has been operated as a rental and more recently a short-term rental. In the application process, they discovered that they're too close to the property line. So could they have, in fact, apply for a variance under the TUP?
Go ahead.
Through the mayor. So that's a big question because I don't know the full story. So if it's a garden suite, that's approved by the town as a garden suite. So all the garden suites approved by the town have gone through a form and character process, then hopefully a building permit or a conversion, and then brought up to code. So in that case, if it's a garden suite that's been permitted by the town, and it's too close to the property line, ideally they had variance in that process. If not, then we go back to the beginning. So if it's a garage that was existing, if it was permitted as a garage, we would grandfather that siting in, basically. But once the use changes, that triggers a form and character process, so council would have to look at the look and feel of the building. Once they get their permission for that form and character and then the conversion, then at that point, they could apply for a business license. But a lot of these that have come off the market are potentially garages that were converted without permits. So we've got a number of people in Gibsons who have gone through the process, who have applied, who have paid DCCs, who have gone through council and gotten their permits, and then a few that have not. So there's no grandfathering or looking at those as permitted as safe because we've never had the opportunity to look at them to make sure they're safe. Again, if they're renting them out as long-term residences, the town's not knocking on people's doors trying to get permits and legalize these suites. It's when people are coming to the town and asking for a business license, we need to make sure that they meet the code and they're done properly.
Okay, well, this is, I'd had conversations with staff about this the last couple of weeks in trying to determine whether some council clarification and direction could be helpful here. I'm not sure I'm hearing the same thing this afternoon, in that we can't actually clarify direction. I don't know what other councillors are, or if this, I don't know if the CAO can enlighten us on that. I mean, like I said, I've looked at other municipalities. I'm not a planner. I'm not a building inspector. I can't actually go in and say, oh, actually they're doing this. But I can see in their guidelines and what they're kind of communicating out that they're not doing full building inspections automatically to short-term rentals. I do understand that was a decision that our staff made, that they would be doing that. And I don't know, I'm kind of confused now if there's a way that, if there's an opportunity for council to clarify that, saying, actually, I am kind of, the three councillors who are here were all part of the bylaw process before, and I wasn't. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. It is difficult because I totally appreciate what the Director of Planning is saying. We put a process in place. What unfortunately appears to have happened that people bought properties with an existing situation. They operated in the gray zone that occurred, that was in place with us not having a bylaw. And now we have a bylaw, they're caught in a trap. We've come up with a procedure and a process which is ostensibly fair to people who've played by the rules. And I think we're sort of skating out on thin ice a bit if we start looking at poking loopholes in our bylaw to meet sort of extenuating circumstances. I think staff have been very cooperative in working with some of these people to try and resolve their issues. It's just really awkward, but I think it puts us in an awkward, I would be more willing to have a recommendation from staff in light of the fact of some of these problem cases they're dealing with. Is there some resolution that staff could suggest? But I don't know that looking necessarily, starting picking holes in the bylaw and creating loopholes is going to solve the problem. I don't know what staff's feeling is about, because it's only it's probably half a dozen cases that have.
Well, I know what Councillor Lumley will say is just get rid of the bylaw and start over again. And I'm starting to get inclined to that position too, because clearly we can't work with this bylaw. Like I was hoping to make it work with some of these proposals.
As follow-up, how many people have
not gonna
applied
happen.
and complied with the bylaw in total between TUP and business licenses?
So through the mayor, we knew of 71 residential guest accommodation operators in town. Of the 71 that we knew of, we have 53 applications. So 53 people have come forward and either obtained their license or have gone through a TUP process or are coming to council through a TUP process. So of the 52 actually. It's tricky to calculate these numbers. So we have 52 applications received. 18 of those are in principal residences and 34 are in non-principal residences. I would have to go look through our numbers to find out how many have triggered a building permit. So some of these have triggered building permits, not all of them. So I can find that number. I don't have it right now off the top of my head. But so that's where we're at right now. 53 people have come forward. Or 53 business licenses. Some are multiple licenses on one property.
See, a mouth opening in the back.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So if there's multiple listings, they each require an individual license on the same property. I just want to give you a little snapshot from last week. We issued 22 fines last week for people that we had been writing to, inviting them to apply and just had not made contact with us. And as of today, with those 22, we have 8 of them are now in the process of applying. We have 1 application, 1 removed, and 11 outstanding. So I feel that each time that we give them a gentle reminder that, come in and apply, it is triggering that response. So we'll be closer to 60 at the end of this week out of the 71 original. which in my mind is pretty good compliance. And we're always working towards it too. So if that helps, sorry, thank you.
Councillor D'Andretti?
I think I'm hearing kind of two conflicting ideas, so help me, because what I get is I understand the intention, we all have the same intention, but my understanding is according to our director, we cannot do that. And then we hear that, well, but other municipalities are doing, should we perhaps, I don't know, I'm confused because, and then Councillor Lumley suggested, well, we just get rid of the bylaw, but or something like that, or we change the bylaw. No, but it doesn't matter.
What do we do then?
No, it doesn't matter who, but the thing is,
Start over again.
but my understanding is we cannot compromise safety, right? Because it can fire back. So I have no idea how Seychelles can do something that is not legal. Sorry?
What's that?
Or I don't know if they are saying they can bad, or I don't know. My understanding is there has to be compliance with, if my understanding. So I'm understanding we cannot get around this situation with regard to safety, with regard triggering building inspector if you have not gone through the process. So unless there's a way, because it seems according to what other municipalities are doing, so how they are doing, well, maybe we need to know, but according to our director, we should not be doing that. So independent of,
Well, we're,
I
Go
can
ahead.
add to the safety piece a little bit. Not all of these will or may trigger building inspections, as Leslie Ann was saying earlier, but it really depends on the situation. Again, to reiterate what you were saying is, in both cases, for the Stream 1 or Stream 2, for example, if Stream 1, they're applying for a room in the house, if that's an existing room in the house and drawings show that, and their declaration says that, it likely won't need to go to the building department because it's already there and it's being previously approved. If someone's applying for a room in the house that never was a room, or they're altering the house as part of the Stream 1 application to create the room, obviously that would trigger a building permit and building inspections, and then they would have to comply with the code and safety. But if it was shown that that room was never there and it's not even a bedroom, it's just an office with no windows or anything like that, I'd say that should be denied because it puts some liability onto the town. We're now approving people to rent out an unsafe situation just through a business license. So that's one piece that I would caution. The other piece, and I don't know what other jurisdictions are doing, but I don't know if it matters because I think they might not have considered that, or maybe they have and they have provisions in place for that. Stream 2, however, with the secondary suites is exactly as we've said, is if it's shown that a secondary suite is an illegal suite, an unauthorized suite, however old it is or new, that would obviously trigger a building permit. And I don't think there would be any allowances on that because it's in our bylaws, it's in the building code. Provincial regulations would say that it's by legalizing an illegal suite is a change of use. It's a change of occupancy from a single family dwelling to two-family dwelling. So that would trigger the building permit and building inspections, and that's how we would look at the safety items. Again, if we were to not follow through with that and just have a license inspection or a business license, and in lieu of any permits, again, I would caution, I don't think we can do that. And it puts us, the town, and a liability, again, approving a possibly unsafe situation. And it's really hard for us too, because it plays on the heartstrings of everybody. We know, we live in the community, and it's not a great part of the job, but we all got to deal with it. And yeah, it's tough, but that's the reality. It's got to be safe and it's got to be approved. So yeah.
okay. questions? Councillor Kroll?
You know, I certainly, support staff in their position and flagging the potential pitfalls. And I think our building inspector hit it is, we get hit directly with people pulling at our heartstrings, getting accosted in the grocery store, or emails or whatever. I think staff, from the indications I've had, have been immensely cooperative in working with some of these people. We did agree that we had set a date to review the bylaw. There are a couple of people who've reached out to me, and I'll just go back to them and say, hey, did you do this? Did you do that? There is a process in place, as opposed to taking the shortest point of, oh my God, we're going to have to sell the house and leave the town. And, so I don't know, exactly how many, I've had maybe 3 people approach me, but, out of 60 some odd, that's, that's fairly minimal. And, what we agreed at the onset of it, I think we're achieving those goals. So, I appreciate, what staff have, reiterated to us today.
Okay, Councillor Andrade, I'd like to close this up soon.
A question, because since the decision of going through this process for some people are tied to, well, I'm going to go through all this, but perhaps in 2 years I will lose the license. And then it will trigger the evaluation program, that the intention of this evaluation program is to evaluate, and I think one of the first principles is retaining long-term rental. So the question is our evaluation program able to analyze if this policy solve this first priority? Because that's what my understanding when we trigger the evaluation program, because I feel
think we're getting off topic here.
But Mayor, not in a way, because many people are making decisions. This is monetary decision. Why I'm going to invest, I don't know, $5, $6, $7, $10,000 in a TUP that I have no idea if this program is going to end. And I understand from this council and perhaps the next council that, well, we did this because we want to protect some rental market, and but maybe the situation will change in the future. So I think in this regard, the evaluation program is very important because it would give us information. So my question is, do we have an evaluation program right now that will measure
Can you answer
this?
it in 30 seconds, because we're almost out of time?
Okay, so can we bring back, because I think this is an important discussion.
Yeah, it's not related to this issue of building inspection, but since we have.
Maybe Mayor, I disagree because it would trigger.
Okay,
people
but we're
making
we're
investments.
literally running out of time in our meeting. So, is there an answer to that question?
Yes, we have an evaluation program.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll ask staff then after, because I don't know if they fulfill all these criteria.
So I don't think there's support for the recommendation. Unfortunately, there's it is hard messaging for those people, and the research and work I put into trying to find a solution was not viable. So I'm not going to move forward with that, and we are reaching the end of our time. The next meeting, Councillor Kroll?
Just for clarification, I believe
Right.
you had brought the motion or proposed the change for clarification on the 90 days. I think, that's fine. But as to how we deal with some of these other ones, I think it's far too complicated an issue. But did you want to move the portion about the clarification on the 90 days?
We did, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could move the first one too, and just, I could move it in different language and we could defeat it, but we're at 5 o'clock now, so the meeting's adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
Sure. We want a motion. All those in favor? The motion carries.